Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. May peace be upon you. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell welcoming you to today's segment on Muslim Network TV. I hope all of you are doing well and staying safe. As often we begin with a prayer. In the name of God, the most compassionate, most merciful. All praise and thanks belong to God, the Lord of the world. May peace and blessings be upon Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all of God's prophets and messengers. So today we're going to be discussing a topic that is important to people all over the world, no matter whether you live in the United States, Asia, Africa. It's something that impacts all of us, and that is climate change. We have a very special guest who's going to tell us about the latest in the struggle to get climate change under control, and also some recent news developments that are very relevant to us. So let's bring on our special guest, Mr. David Hales. David is an American environmentalist. He chairs the Climate Action Task Force at the Parliament of World Religions. Thank you so much for joining us, David. How are you?
My pleasure, Edward. It's nice to see you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
the invitation.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So, David, first question to you. Tell us about the climate clock drop. What does it mean? What does it signify? And what is the latest?
The climate clock measures the time that we have between now and a imagined tipping point where the difficulty in responding to climate change and in preventing the worst impacts of climate change become inevitable.
Has there been any new development in terms of this timeline, this expected timeline in recent months or years?
The time has been getting narrower and narrower. The science that we've been looking at literally since the 1970s has had the outline of the impacts of climate change right for the past 30, 40 years. And science over that time has been filling in the outline. And one of the things that we haven't gotten right is how fast things are happening in the world of the climate emergency. And so while we've anticipated the effects, sea level rise, fires, droughts, we did not expect them to be manifesting themselves in the current time frame or in as short a time frame as we're actually experiencing today.
Understood. So, David, what do you say to some of the critics who say, well, look, environmentalists have been saying for decades the world's coming to an end and it still hasn't ended. Has some of the evidence you've seen in recent years, some of these weather patterns, this intense heat, is that something you can cite to show that, yes, things are getting worse? This is not normal.
Well, the first thing I would say is we were right. And the patterns are manifesting themselves. And the more lived experience that we go through, the more clear it is that humans have caused a major shift in many of the ecosystems of the world and in the overall climate. And the impacts of that are already being felt by millions, billions of people, perhaps in a summer like this, and will be felt by all of us in the next few years.
Tell us, David, about the sea level rise issue. I think NASA just reported that global sea level rising could pose a significant threat to coastal regions and ecosystems, maybe not even in the long term, but somewhat in the short term. Can you tell us more about that particular threat?
Certainly, and it manifests itself in several ways. One is just the actual sea level is higher, and that impacts both the potential for damage if you have weather events like a hurricane or a typhoon, but it also impacts the freshwater supplies that are just inland of that rising sea level, because as the saltwater pressure goes up, you have saltwater infusion into those drinking water supplies. And for most riparian, most coastal areas around the world, um, this is a reality. We're already seeing it. It goes at rate. And the east coast of the United States, for example, and particularly the northeast coast, is experiencing a higher level of rise than would say a place in the Indian Ocean.
Interesting. And then the other thing that's happened, David, these wildfires in Canada. Now, wildfires, they happen. It's not so unusual, but I don't think we've seen in my lifetime, and I don't know if in your lifetime, this massive clouds coming down from Canada and just enveloping U.S. cities. What's that all about? Are these man-made fires? Is this something that's resulting from extremely dry conditions related to climate change?
Some are man-made, but as you say, forest fires aren't new. The difference is that climate change is a force multiplier on almost all of the kinds of phenomena we're seeing that we associate with climate change now. The In a way, it's a remarkable tipping point in human consciousness because many of us have been able to sit in our apartments and say, "Oh, gee, climate change may be happening, but it's going to be somewhere out in the future. It's going to be somewhere else." But when you're in New York City or Boston or Chicago or even Minneapolis or Toronto, and you're breathing air that harms your health as a result of the massive forest fires which are occurring in northern Canada right now, or if you were in Adelaide last year when the fires were roaring in Australia, it becomes a little more believable that what we're talking about with climate change is part of our lived experience. It's not going back. This is the new normal. This is what we're faced with, and we'll face it every year.
So, David, tell us about the work of the Climate Action Task Force at the Parliament of the World's Religions. What are your main areas of focus right now, and what are the activities that you're engaged in?
We believe, and I think many faiths and interfaith organizations around the world believe also, that climate change is essentially a moral issue. It's about the choices we make. It's not just about our science. Our science gives us solutions. It's not about our economy. We're very rich. We can afford to do things that would be more healthy for our climate, but we haven't chosen to do so. And because it's a moral issue, it is a central concern for the religions of the world and the interfaith organizations, which try to affect and influence of that moral consciousness on the institutions around us.
And so, top priorities for you all right now. I mean, obviously, there's lots of policy discussions happening at the national and global level about what could be done to arrest the progress of climate change, but it seems like things are somewhat frozen in place. What are the top priorities that you think corporations, governments, international organizations should be focusing on in the short term to address climate change?
The single most important is weaning ourselves from fossil fuels. We need to stop oil and gas exploration now. We have more than we can burn. If we burn what is already available to us, this planet will be unlivable. We need to phase down production of oil and gas on an annual basis, measurably doing it in ways that we're very conscious. And we need to set a hard deadline for society moving off of fossil fuels as the basic element of our economy. If we don't do that, all of the other things we'll do around the edges will be futile.
All right, David, heavy stuff. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and your time with us, and we hope you'll come back with us as more developments arise in this struggle to address and protect the people and the environment.
Edward, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me on, and it's a pleasure to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. And thank you all for watching today's segment on Muslim Network TV. We'll see you next time, God willing, inshallah. Until then, assalamu alaikum. May peace be upon you.